Welcome to Art Talk. I'm Patricia Shippee, host of Through the Eyes of the Artist, a program that focuses on art from a human perspective by getting to know the artists, their attitudes, their motivations, and even their lifestyles, all the things that influence their artistic expression, giving us an opportunity to see our world through the eyes of the artist. Barkley Hendricks has been doing outstanding things for the last 2 decades. He is a multifaceted, established, and experienced artist. I'm impressed, and you will be too. Let me read this to you, an excerpt from an issue of Connecticut College magazine. Once the subject of a doer's profile, what kind of man drinks doer's scotch, though he admits he prefers rum, Hendricks is well known for his full-length portraits, painted in the style of photorealism. Quote, "Few people know that my first specialty was photography," says the artist, who earned his master's in fine arts degree from Yale University School of Art in 1972. Now a 20-year man on the Connecticut College faculty, Hendricks hasn't let 2 decades dull the edge of his art. His works are included in many permanent collections, including those of the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and private collections such as the Forbes magazine collection, to name just a few. A Philadelphia native, he has had nearly 24 one-man shows throughout the Northeast, and has traveled extensively in Europe and Africa and China in the role of a cultural ambassador. Welcome to Art Talk, Barkley.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a delight, and there's a lot to talk about here today. And I just talked about you and certain aspects of your life, but I didn't talk about music. And I know that music, particularly jazz, is very important to you. Do you want to give us an idea of how music came into your life and what it means to you?
Well, needless to say, it was a part of the community, but I started to collect right after junior high school. When I say collect, amass a jazz collection now, which ranges in pretty close to 5,000 or so on vinyl and several hundred CD.
Oh, goodness.
And music was always playing in my studio.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere early, I did a little bit of castanets, which started the ball rolling in one direction. And I guess I had to put it on hold until I had a bit more time. My folks didn't give me a pair of bongos like I wanted, so I moved towards the visual arts. And,
oh, you did?
And now I'm involved in learning several instruments, as well as doing some of the things or bringing some of the things out of the closet that was kind of overshadowed by the large format paintings.
So you really started with music, and then you went into the visual arts. Well, as art forms, can you compare music and painting?
There are certainly the inspirations and then at the times motivations. I also link them visually. In fact, the painting behind you, which you asked me to bring about my student days, has a record album jacket cover belonging to the Modern Jazz Quartet, along with an old radio and speakers that I had actually hooked up in my little cubicle in the basement that piped in music at night, and so I incorporated it with the visual and still life form.
The music and the painting. Now,
Sure.
When did you do this painting? Was this when you were a student in Philadelphia?
Yeah, this is done at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and that piece was probably done in 64, 63 or 64.
So,
yeah.
30 years ago, really,
yeah.
really. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the different phases of your painting. Can you say something about the 2 that we have here that are your people paintings? I'm sorry we don't have any of the life-size ones here, but tell us about the people paintings.
Well, we have 2 little, what I call headshots. One self-portrait, which I call Bedroom Eyes, and the other is a good friend of mine who's a director of the Impulse Dance Company in Boston. And her name is Adrian Hawkins. Trying to bring a large painting out on top of my car would have been rather risky today.
Couldn't work it. But the format is there of the starkness, the photorealistic aspect.
Well, sometimes I think that's a misnomer. I've always had a talent for specificity, and to link myself totally with photorealism isn't necessarily correct, although I do use the camera. I find the camera works as a mechanical sketchbook, and the format there is just basically looking at someone and painting them, and I don't necessarily connect that with photorealism.
Well, the details, though, Barkley, are so scrupulous.
But the human eye
is also.
Exactly, that's the first lens.
Yeah. Well, it's a style, it's a mode. Not everyone can do what you do. I mean, obviously, you've got a talent for draftsmanship, too, and the starkness is terrific. Well, you do the people paintings, and then you also have a talent for soft landscapes. And I wonder, can we look at a couple of these, and where did you do these? They're watercolors, aren't they?
Yes.
Where were they done?
The one that leans more towards the blue with a straight line horizon was done on the northern coast of Jamaica in '74, and the one with the black frame is about to be framed up, and that was done on the southern coast from the mountain view, and that gives you a range of almost say 9 years, because that one's just done this December, January.
Well, do you paint mostly landscapes when you're traveling?
Certainly, when I have traveled across North Africa and to West Africa, I took a little sketch pad with me and watercolored when I was in Ghana and Lomé, Togo, and I've certainly photographed also, but I've painted from the I would say the coast of St. Kitts.
Oh yes.
And
yeah.
actually, the Caribbean sort of got me going on the large series that I'm dealing with now.
The Lover's Leap series
of
watercolors. They're really.
Unfortunately, they're a little too large too, and I'm framing them up for an exhibition that I will be having shortly. In fact, that's ready to be mounted and plexiglassed.
Well, I'm glad you were able to bring it today. Well, it's really so interesting to me. Now, I've seen a survey of your paintings, and we'll bring our audience to your studio, and we'll see some more. But if we go from the people paintings, what I call the people paintings, and then to the soft landscapes, it's almost as if you're two different people, or you're more than two different people. How do you switch?
We all?
Well, I guess so, but you can express it in a very specific way. But how do you switch gears from one format to the other?
Well, sometimes the medium dictates a switch. You can't necessarily handle one medium the same way you would do another. And to a certain extent, I like to respond to the medium or let the medium dictate a little bit. The act of watercolor painting was something that was very, very early on with me. I think most people, their introduction to any kind of painting was probably watercolor, and the kind of things.
True. Yeah.
Moms are hanging on refrigerators around the
It's not so
country.
easy, though.
But that's I think the basic and first format. And once I got to the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, oils entered the scene, and they became a central focus for many years. So I kind of did a cyclical turn, circular turn, to return to my very first painting medium.
Interesting, yeah. So many years later, yeah. Wow. Well, when did you start the Life-Size People series? I mean, we're going from the 60s, 70s, 80s.
I would say 66, 67.
Before Connecticut College, before
Certainly.
you started to teach here. Yeah. Well, again, we have a lot to talk about, but why don't we bring our viewers over to your home and studio, which you were kind enough to share with us. So we're going to now take a little trip over to your home. And we're entering here. This is the entryway of your house, and we're seeing all sorts of objects. And we're going to see lots more objects as we go around. You'll also know that Barkley is a great collector of things. Is that a wind chime there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I even collect yard sale signs.
Yard sale signs.
As well as yard sale stuff.
And hats. I know you always are wearing, every time I've seen you, you had a crazy hat on. Collections, collections. Barkley is taking a little bit of time off, for which I thank you, from your framing job, getting ready for an exhibit. And we're sitting here in Susan's room. Thank you for that, too, before we go up to the studio. And I noticed everywhere, as we walked in, Barkley, and everywhere around me, that you're quite a collector of things. Does that...
A lot of stuff.
Yeah. Does it affect your work? I mean, is collecting part of the building up of your image making?
Well, certainly, but I would also say that I have a fixation for yard sales. I'm kind of a yard sale junkie.
Is that what you do on Saturdays?
Yeah, sometimes before my show.
Oh.
So I get a chance to add to various parts of my collection and, as I say, use the stuff as it works with the general ideas.
Well, when we go upstairs, we're going to share that with everybody. Yeah, it's incredible. Well, now, would you take us on a small tour of some of the work we're seeing here? Let's start with perhaps your collection of crystal balls.
Quite a few are gifts from my wife Susan, and a few are, for example, the orb, the baseball is a piece that I did in gold leaf, and a couple of the eggs are eggs that I bought in China.
From this last trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a Barkley Hendricks baseball.
Yeah, I hadn't worked in gold leaf for several years, and I needed several subjects, and so I started doing hats and shoes. And a friend, an agent that I had years ago in New York, was involved with doing baseball prints, so I had a bunch of baseballs I gotten from Salvation Army, so I just did about 4 or 5 of them up in gold leaf.
A gold one. Fantastic. Well, this is quite a collection. Do you do crystal ball readings? No. Well, let's go look at some of the artwork on the walls. Can we start with the drawings that are above that fantastic yellow radiator?
The drawing is of a friend, and it's part of what I call my sanguine, beautiful like a woman, real woman series.
Beautiful what?
Beautiful like a woman, a real woman.
Great name.
Well, actually, the name is from Charles Mingus' composition. And if you listen to my program, which you said you did not long ago,
I heard part of it the other day.
My opening theme ends with beautiful like a woman, a real woman. So that's part of my
drawing series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the top 2 photographs are part of a series of photographs that I was doing in black and white, but painting over them in various shades of toners and photographed oils and dyes. They were done, oh, good 15 years ago or more. And the little stippling was from high school.
You're kidding.
Yeah. So.
The still life is a high school work.
Yeah.
So this just goes to prove you had the talent as an early in your life as a young person.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that some more over at the studio, the station. Now let's move along and go over to this colorful watermelon shoe piece. What's that about?
Well, we slide past the watercolor of St. Kitts. I don't know whether it will read well in the light, but next to it, the piece called Sacrifice of the Watermelon Virgin, or Shirt Off Our Back.
Okay. And you actually took the shirt off somebody's back.
No, someone gave it to me. No, you don't take things off. People give them to you. And
great shirt.
I was ready to go down to Philadelphia to do this print at the Brandywine Workshop, and I was thinking of a motif for the background, and this woman, while I was at the bar, came up, and I was talking with two other friends, and she had this bright yellow shirt on, and I asked, could I see it fully? And she turned around and took it off her back and gave it to me.
Straight off her back.
So hey, so how many women give you the shirt off their backs? And mind you, the shoes off their feet.
Yeah. That's
I get a lot.
right.
Yeah, I get a lot of.
Start collecting for
I
you.
get a lot of them. So.
Oh golly. Well, we all will start collecting for you now that we see the objects that you do collect. We'll probably meet you at some of the flea markets on Saturdays here in town. There's so many objects, and well, they're all part of your life. How about the round painting, going back to the Renaissance, Tondo? Where is that?
That's on a wonderful beach on the south side of the island of Jamaica. It's called Treasure Beach, or actually it's called Calabash Bay, but it's part of what I call my Treasure Beach series. And
you can see the Jamaican sunlight, that's for sure. You can almost hear the music. Yeah.
And the others are, well, part of that series. I have, I guess, about 40 or so. I take
we might
actually
see some upstairs.
Yeah. What happens? The embroidery hoops that I stretch canvas over and gesso,
Yeah, I was going to ask you about
and
that.
take them out to the beach and sit right down and paint.
Terrific. And then some watercolors over there in the corner.
Yeah, those are from Cape Coast, Ghana, and Lomé, Togo, when I was there in 78. Yeah.
More of your travels, more of your very interesting travels, which we want to talk about some more. Well, now, thank you for this little tour, and why don't we go upstairs and see works in progress? Believe it or not, we're in Barkley Hendricks' studio, where he actually works. I can't quite believe it, but you do have space enough to do a painting here. Actually get back and do a painting, or even put a painting in enough clear space to work on it and be able to walk back and forth from it. How do you feel about all the stuff around you?
There are actually 3 paintings back there. There's 1, 2, 3, so they're stacked. They're in progress. And,
yeah. But this is your painting spot.
Well, yeah, for now.
Okay.
For now.
All right, yeah. You've got all this room, and it's all filled with things.
Well, it wasn't necessarily planned that way. Certain things come to you, and you work with them and around them. And right now there's a whole pile of things that are works in progress. And so you learn to deal with the space that you have. And
like, how many pairs of shoes?
Thousands.
Do we have? Really?
Thousands.
And where do you get them?
Yard sales, bag sales. Yesterday, friends. Yesterday, the Family Services Armory sale with books and other stuff, records, and where else?
Well, tell us, though, Barkley, the symbolism of shoes for you. Why do you collect them? What do they mean to you?
Fashion statements
Mm-hmm.
that can be taken in a number of different directions, and certainly the higher the heel, the more the erotic potential, the area.
Sexiness of the person,
Well,
if you will.
As well, I was going to
Can we
quote.
talk about
I was going to quote Mae West, but I do that later on.
All right, all right.
The great American philosopher Mae West.
Yes, that's true.
So yeah,
Yeah.
she says too much of a good thing is wonderful. So that's one of my favorite. I got a sweatshirt with that. But the area of fashion, as I told you earlier, I kind of got started because a friend was getting ready to throw away a pair, and I was collecting stuff for just regular still eyes, and I said, well, I'll keep those. So it started with that pair, and then
when was that? Give me an idea of time
this was
and the
in
evolution of your work.
about 73 or 74.
Okay. So 20 years
75.
ago. So you've been collecting shoes for 20 years.
Right.
And it happened that way, but their symbolism then took on more meanings for you, didn't they?
Well,
Yeah.
so behind you, you have a basketball there,
Yeah.
and for 2 years I used to do, well, longer than that, I used to do basketballs. And I started to notice there was a difference between the reaction to things between the basketball and shoes. I look at basketball, shoes, they're two objects.
Yeah.
But there's that added power that goes along with the shoes that I started to get dialogue from women, which I didn't get women dialogue about basketballs or other still lives.
Yeah.
So there were stories that go along with these shoes, or, for example, you made a comment about seeing shoes that they're as part of your past life.
Yes.
And I started to get all kinds of dialogues about the shoes that I would put in works, and this was an interesting phenomenon given the fact that it didn't happen with basketball. And I say for years I did basketball pieces, and as I said before, they were just objects.
Yeah.
But now the objects begin to sort of take on various stories, like one pair of shoes that I bought at a yard sale, and it had mud up to the heel. And when I was buying them, the woman said, yeah, I remember the wedding I went to. It had rained the day before, and all the women were sunk up to their heels, and now I'm getting rid of those things. So there are various stories that goes along with some of the heels, and I like to incorporate them sometimes in some of the works.
Yeah. Well, what about the women in your life? And for instance, you mentioned earlier too your grandmother and your mother. Are the shoes part of that, or
the piece that I was telling you about? I had put together a kind of gold lame 1950s high heel on a cross, and in the toe I put some of my hair and put it on the wall. And the show that I had in Barrow, Vermont, I put the show up and went up the next week to document it, and I got back and they had taken it down. So I asked why. He said, well, he was Jewish, and he was a little afraid that the Christians would look at him and sort of feel that it was blasphemous. And I said, you didn't ask me. And I said, I would have told you that my great-great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, and all of them were devoutly religious, and it relates to how I see females in the church. Most churches you go to during the course of the Sundays are populated with women. And so I feel that women are carrying the cross in essence.
What a statement. Actually, a beautiful statement.
And then you look underneath the pew, you see those high heels kicked off for comfort, and then put them right back on when they march out. So I wasn't dealing with it at all from trying to make a statement about it was dealing with family. And my mother was a very attractive woman and growing up, and I remember her and her friends dressed in fashions, statements at a time, and then when they came home, they kicked the shoes off, and the kids would be playing with them like cars across the floor and that kind of stuff. So
that was part of your life.
Yeah.
All of this is part of your life
yeah.
and a story. Well, I think that piece was probably a beautiful piece.
Well, it was called Mother Little Helper.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah,
So,
yeah. Let's see. Can we kind of tour around here and see some of these things? Piles and piles of shoes.
and furs and
Other works in progress. Did you want to go and look over here, or let's get into this pile of shoes here and stuff.
all right.
This is your collection table, I take it.
Well, all of his works in progress. This is I'm working on my rollerblade heels, you know, like that. Well,
That will be kinetic, I take it.
well, we found a woman with my Cinderella with size 10 who want to get up on these. You know? These are part of
Is this a painting? Oh, that's
part of my Virgin
series.
series.
Yeah,
These are
yeah,
the
okay.
twin virgins. You can't. You know.
Right.
Actually,
Yeah, there they are. And so you sort of work around all of these objects.
well, they're recent acquisitions,
Right.
and I've been incorporating belts around certain pieces as frames, as you can see here.
Yeah, I saw. Well, in the painting we might have
Right.
seen downstairs, there was a belt tied around the pair of shoes, the red shoes.
That was kind of inspired by, I went to a yard sale and a woman just had several pair just tied together for convenience to get rid of, and that's how that kind of evolved. And let's say, in collecting belts,
Okay.
that just
So we
happened
have
to
to
the,
watch out for belts for you now, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
especially the ones with studded belts, a little bit more
Oh,
character.
yeah.
and,
Well, I
get
can
those,
see how you use them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You have
So-
to go out to the Southwest. I'd like to ask about the Bibles. Tell us about the Bibles.
Oh, given, I say, my background, the old, well, on a stack of Bibles, you know, so I figured I'd put a stack of Bibles out there for those people who want to say, all right, I'll produce them for you, just put your hand on them. So, so
Well-
it's also a little bit of my pyramid experience.
From Egypt.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so it just toppled over, the top fell off. It was always,
Little guy.
yeah, they were always up to the parrot almost,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it kind of toppled
Well,
over.
is it going to be like a performance piece? Are you going to paint them? Or
I don't know. I was thinking about just sort of stacking them up there and just pouring polyurethane right over them, or hard plastic and encase them.
Yeah.
That was the general concept, and maybe put on like those TV legs for wheels. I'm not quite sure. It's like I said, it's evolving.
Yeah. And there it is on
Okay,
a stack
I
of
only have
Bibles.
4 minutes.
But
We
we
only have
actually
4
have a work table over there. Do you use it?
Occasionally, if I have to cut something or looking for something.
Yeah.
There's
yeah.
the rib cage, human rib cage over there that I was using for part of my American Anatomy series several years ago, and I haven't quite finished with that series, so
Do
I
you have
leave
any
it.
of those paintings here? The anatomy paintings?
They're upstairs, but they're all wrapped up completely.
Oh, okay.
Completely.
So we won't get to see those today.
Upstairs and all.
Well, can we go into the other studio room now and see what you're doing in there?
Sure.
Okay.
That was incredible, Barkley. Now I have to ask you this question. Do you need to have chaos in your environment in order to work creatively?
I guess we should describe what is chaos.
Well, for me, all the stuff that you have around, your shoes and all the things you collect, that's rather chaotic, I think. But for you, it isn't.
I say it depends on how we describe chaos.
Well, that's a very good answer, because I read so many of the reviews. You've had so many critical reviews of the shows you've had throughout your career by many noted critics. And one of them is William Zimmer of the New York Times, and he quoted you as, he said that you were, quote, a master of mingling art and life. What do you think about that? What does he mean by that?
Well, I think he's rather wise, because art and life is inseparable. So I try to take my little chunk of it and make it interesting, and link that aspect that catches our attention from time to time, that we zero in on, and make it interesting for me as well as the spectator.
Well, you've always had this creative force within you, photography, printmaking, painting, music, Have I missed anything else? Collage, teaching, all these things are creative to you and all are part of life. I sort of feel inadequate because I'm sure that we all have our creative aspects and mingle them with life, but you do it in so many different creative ways. I'm not using the right word here, but mingling art and life is very much you. What about photography? Can you show us a few of these photographs that we have here that you did of the jazz series?
Sure. The linkage with music can be, I think, certainly explained a bit more visually with my love for various instrumentalists such as Miles Davis here.
Is that Miles? Okay.
Certainly. And George Sherry.
See, that's like a people painting with the person just dominating.
Mill Jackson. John Lewis. Percy Heath. The only one that I'm missing here of the group, we get a little bit of corner of his drums, is Connie Kay, who the percussionist for the Modern Jazz Quartet, and I photographed them at Newport in 1982. And as I said earlier, the painting has a Modern Jazz Quartet album jacket, so I've been following them for ages. And,
did you ever play with them?
Oh, that I would.
Can't
well,
do that.
I would love that. Hey.
You photographed, but you didn't play with them.
No, I didn't get an opportunity yet.
Have you ever shown those? I mean, did you exhibit these these photographs, I should say?
Yes, these have been, I think, to Florida and several other places along the East Coast for various exhibitions.
No, they're beautiful, Barkley. They really are. Well, we have to take a short public service announcement break, and then we'll be right back.
You think I don't know drugs are bad news? Man, I passed dealers on my way to school. See guys in the alley doing crack. I even saw somebody get shot. I already know about drugs, but what I want to know about now is, how do these fly?
Our kids have better things to do than drugs, but they need our help to keep it that way.
Tuberculosis used to be a leading cause of death. Today, it's highly treatable, and healthy people rarely come down with TB, even when they're exposed to it. Still, the number of cases of TB is on the rise, so it's good to know the warning signs. Persistent cough, fatigue, unexplained fever or weight loss, and drenching night sweats are signals to see a doctor. With the right medical treatment, TB can be cured. For a free booklet with more information, write the Will Rogers Institute, White Plains, New York.
Freddie.
Hi, Grandpa.
Sitting out here by yourself?
No, I'm talking to Shep.
Mind if I join you?
For young and old alike, a healthy, happy pet is a companion for life. See that your pet gets regular veterinary care. A public service message from the American Veterinary Medical Association.
A mammogram can reveal breast cancer 2 years before it's large enough to feel with your fingers. That greatly improves your chance to save your life with less drastic forms of treatment. Get your first mammogram between the ages of 35 and 40, unless, of course, you suspect a problem earlier. Then have one every year or two while in your 40s, and every year after 50.
A mammogram is a valuable tool in the early detection of breast cancer and can help save your life.
To learn more, write the Will Rogers Institute, White Plains, New York.
Welcome back to Art Talk. I'm Patricia Shippee, host of Through the Eyes of the Artist, and I'm here today with Barkley Hendricks, artist and professor of art at Connecticut College. Barkley, you had in the upstairs studio a painting in progress, and it didn't seem like there was anything spontaneous going on there, but you had some photographs and other images. Do you do preparatory drawings, or do you photograph, or how do you proceed?
It depends on certainly the subject. I am working currently, the piece that was, say, in progress, with several new media, and I wanted to use that as a test painting. I like to incorporate, if I don't use a model specifically, clippings and other reference material to build the idea until I get it where I want it. But I use the model directly. I can work from photographs. I use both together. So there are several different ways to approach one of my pieces currently. Although the two here are direct poses, like me looking in the mirror, or the model where if I'm painting you, I would just work.
Yeah,
So,
okay. Just go at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we saw, well, we didn't see too many of them, but, and I've had the opportunity of seeing a lot of the paintings, the people paintings, the Big Guy series. We did see pieces. The costumes and the fashions are very important, and they're scrupulously chosen. Even the girl behind you in the little doll. Why, and we saw the collection of shoes, etc. Why is fashion or why are costumes an issue for you?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the collection of shoes came from a still life concept. Someone's getting ready to throw away a pair of shoes, and you can see shoes all over art history. And just in this particular sort of situation, they were platforms. So it begins to sort of mark my particular time period with them. But clothing and fashion is a part of our daily lives, and I like to use that element to convey a particular state of mind. And let's face it, a number of human beings define themselves by their fashions.
Clothes make the man, whoever
Well,
said
they
that.
have used that on numerous occasions.
Yeah, well, you're making a statement in your paintings with that, aren't you?
Certainly. I think it's at times an important component of the individual. Although I don't have any objection to working from the nude figure. It's just most of my images are clothed.
Well, what about the people you choose to paint? How do you choose the models? I know that you were in France and you did a marvelous painting of two men. Did you do that in incredible outfits? Did you do that there? And how do you choose the people, and then do people model for you? Or?
Certainly. That particular painting, I was in Paris at the time, and these two gentlemen happened to be coming down the street, and there was a wonderful chemistry between them, and I asked could I photograph them, and they said fine. So I took slides and black and white and blew it up when I got back and did the painting.
Yeah, so you find the people, really.
Sure, then plus there are a number of people who've, say, volunteered. And
do people drop into your studio and want to be painted? Or?
No, I mean, not drop into New London, no. New London, you just don't drop in.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
No.
Well, I thought Big Chuck dropped in.
Well, that was a little different.
Okay.
This is a different situation, not where I am now. Which
do you teach drawing at all at the college?
One of the classes I'm teaching this semester is fundamental drawing, or basic drawing, foundation drawing, as we call it.
Is that figure?
Certainly. Not as much as I would like it, given where we are and the problematic area of working with nude models. So,
okay. Yeah. Well, again, Barkley, there's so much to talk about here, and we want to go back. I want to talk about paints and experimentation, but we're going to go now to your studio again. We're going to bring the viewers back to see a little bit more of your studio and a little bit of the music room. So let's do that, and then we'll come back some more. Okay?
Sure.
Barkley, this is your black light series. Tell us about it.
Well, this particular piece, as you can see, responds well to ultraviolet or black light, and it's a part of this particular series is my Eclipse series, which relates to the solar eclipse, and also a composition by Charles Mingus called Eclipse. And his reference is two bodies come together as one. Again, dealing with the celestial. And the medium is Dr. Martin's dyes, and which is watercolor. Graphite pencil.
To start with, are the watercolors
The yellow and pink, tropic pink, responds well to black light. And this paper, which is 50% rag, works well.
Is there a message here? Is that calligraphy, or what do we have here?
Well, there isn't a message. I've been working with the shape of would-be letters and a kind of cadence that one would find, say, if you travel across North Africa. You wouldn't necessarily know how to interpret what you see now unless you knew the language. But there's a kind of a movement, a grace, a style that I like. And there's also kind of a relationship to the area of sort of talking in tongues. You have no idea what's in it, but so it's kind of, but written in kind of tongues in a way.
It almost has a prehistoric feeling. How about another one?
All right. This is a part of a series, the Langston Hughes series, called Big Screen of a Welfare Check. And the motif or the shape of the television screen is the motivating force behind this. And, yeah. Well, I didn't want to sort of do it quite literally in terms of a TV screen, so you have to do a little bit of just opposing of mediums. And this is also graphite with watercolor and Crayola Dago crayons.
That's really a social commentary, an abstract social commentary.
Yeah, yeah.
Where the light rays are. You get it? Okay, I got this one. Light really picks it up.
And this was part of a series that was inspired by, I came in possession of about 50 or so x-rays from various hospitals, from the dealing with teeth and abdomens, and so it was a part of a kind of my anatomy series also.
And the black light, for some reason, well,
Works
X-ray,
well.
ultraviolet.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
And
it's rather bizarre with hearts around it. What about that frame?
well, it's the rear entry series.
Okay.
So.
Okay. What else are you working on in this room, Barkley? These are fantastic.
There's
You've got other works in progress here. Oh yeah, great. Let's look at these.
The series of images that you see here are inspired by my, again, sort of South Beach involvement.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Great. Here's another one.
All right. Let me throw them over here. It'll be a lot easier.
Good.
Actually, they're just basically little oils on pieces of linen and cotton canvas. Mostly the linen. And what I do is take oils down to the beach and paint.
Hoops,
well, actually, you know, by that time the embroidery hoops have been taken off, and I'm using them flat on a series of.
So you prime them while they're in the hoops. Is that what you do?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you paint them.
All right.
Okay, great. Yeah. And it's beautiful. Are these more Jamaica or in this part of the world?
No, these are Treasure Beach, Jamaica.
Yeah. Beautiful. So different from some of the people that you draw and paint, and it's kind of refreshing for you to go back and forth with landscapes.
Well, hey.
Yeah, good for you, good for you. Well, what about, because we don't have a heck of a lot more time, the new Virgin series? Tell us how that started.
Well, I've been taking a poll of various women that I met, and I've asked whether they know about what they call this particular pin. Yeah. And I've gotten a number of responses, and basically in this area it's related to as just a circle pin. And I just got information today about it being called an eternity pin. But growing up in Philadelphia when I was, say, a youngster, just becoming aware of sex, this is used to be called a virgin pin. And girls would wear it on various sides of their shoulders.
Something,
yeah. Well, I would assume as much. Yeah. So I hadn't seen these since high school, and that was like in '63. And in my yard sale, sort of foraging, I came across 2 of these about 3 years ago, and I had an automatic flashback to a conversation of several young women about the particular side that this one other young woman was wearing this on. Mm-hmm. And being, say, a young male at the time, I was a little foggy about certain issues, but I did remember that dialogue because the significance of the pin. I forget which side it is supposed to indicate.
Or the object that you found.
So it led.
Object started a whole series.
Yeah, it started to incorporate itself on or with squares that, as I mentioned earlier, where I started to use the belts and the pearlescent medium. I mean, pearl,
paint.
You can see in the black light.
Oh yes, oh yes.
And actually, it started to evolve from. I started stretching these squares up in my 101 class to do painting demonstrations, and I had gotten about half dozen, and they kind of sat around for ages, and it was kind of an amalgamation. I started to put together, and I started to mold the vagina area with modeling paste and gesso, and but the biggest thing for me was the discovery of the paint medium. The goldens. Yeah, you know, it sounds like a. So the final touches was the addition of the fur, which started to soften it and give it somewhat of a native and indigenous American motif. What with, for example, you know, dealing with the furs that the Native Americans used in some of their work.
Costumes,
and I say that because of my background, my family. Yeah.
Barkley, we have to move on now, and we're going to go down to your room, okay? Let's do that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was terrific.
I had fun.
Well, I'm sure you did. Sounds great. Well, we now know about music, and certainly your music heroes you mentioned. What about painting heroes? What artists influenced you the most? What ones?
A man named Ben Kamahara is one of my all-time favorite painters. He lives in Philadelphia. And there are a few others. Lou Sloan, who happen to be, you mentioned teachers, influences. I consider them to be some of the best painters in the country today. And certainly the masters are those that have influenced in ways that certainly can be seen in some of my images.
Come through.
Yeah, there's the art of paint handling, the art of using light, the art of using the ground of the canvas as a tool to...
yeah, you talked about experimentation with paints. That's important too, isn't it?
Well, new technology has offered a number of different ways to, as one would say, express oneself.
Yeah.
But I look at it a way to try new and different products that might take me off in a direction that will be equally as satisfying as some of the others.
Yeah, so you've had a real, speak about directions, you've had many different directions of your work.
Well, I have a love of art and using the medium in ways to express whatever feeling or point in time, objects or people.
How would you summarize your work over the last 20 years, Barkley?
Well, it's still in progress.
Great.
Under construction.
Terrific. That's terrific. Under construction. Well, now, as an artist, I guess I have to say, as a painter, what impression do you want us to have of you and your work? Who is Barkley Hendricks, the painter?
Good question. Still being worked on. What you see today may not necessarily be here 20 years from now.
But is there an overall impression that you want
Well,
us...
as I mentioned to you earlier about Picasso, I think it's an accurate description in terms of a man's life's work. Where do you come in on his life's work? And what you know of that particular aspect, does it sort of cover his full span?
You feel like you're just going to keep growing and growing.
As long as there's breath in the frail old body, yeah.
That's terrific. But is there a direction you're going in right now, or you really don't know? Or I'm answering your question.
Well, I wouldn't say I know fully. There's a process of discovery that you have to let happen. There's certainly a format or a particular association with the work, but I find if you don't leave yourself open for other possibilities.
That's great. Lots of discoveries. Barkley, we've run out of time, I'm afraid. This happens to us. Thank you for being with us for this week's Art Talk. Until next time, I'm Patricia Shippee.